On December 26, 2023, the Shanghai Municipal People's Court publicly sentenced Hu Wenming, the commander-in-chief of China's first domestically built aircraft carrier, the Shandong, and former chairman of the China Shipbuilding Industry Corporation, CSIC. The court ruled that during his 20 years in office, he received bribes of about US $8.4 million. This number is much smaller than the information revealed by insiders. He was sentenced to 13 years in prison and fined 10 million yuan for taking bribes and abuse of power as an employee of a state-owned company. However, the sentence handed down by the Shanghai Intermediate Court made no mention of leaks, which had been widely rumored before. Hu Wenming served successively as Deputy General Manager of China Aviation Industry Corporation, Deputy General Manager of China National Weapons Industry Corporation, and Chairman of China Shipbuilding Industry Corporation, with a resume that covers the equipment manufacturing companies of the Navy, Army, and Air Force. These companies are among the CCP's top 10 military enterprises. According to official CCP reports, Hu Wenming was a key contributor to the development of the CCP's J-10 submarines and the C-919 domestic airplane, and he was also the commander-in-chief of the development of the CCP's first domestically produced aircraft carrier, the Shandong carrier. He was dubbed the father of the aircraft carrier by the Chinese government. The sentencing of this father of aircraft carriers has drawn attention to the quality of China's aircraft carriers and other military equipment. Chinese netizens questioned, can the aircraft carriers built by an individual like this be trusted? In recent years, China's military spending has been heavily skewed toward the Navy and rocket force, resulting in a serious shortage of land capabilities. In this episode, we will focus on Chinese aircraft carriers and tanks. Let's start with tanks. For Chinese military enthusiasts, watching tanks whiz by and shoot at targets on the move is exhilarating. Russia has been organizing the tank biathlon since 2013. The Chinese side has participated in the event several times with their representatives. In this sport, tanks have two main tasks, running and target shooting. Running means crossing all kinds of terrain and roadblocks. Target shooting mainly involves shooting targets using the main gun, the anti-aircraft machine gun, and the coaxial machine gun, respectively. Since the tank biathlon was held in 2013, the winner has always been Russia. Many Chinese netizens think that the Russian side has been unfair in ruling against China. For example, in 2022, Russia added a minefield rule. That is, certain areas are designated as minefields, without informing the participants of the minefield's locations. Of course, no real mines are planted. This results in the fact that one can't spot a mine by any means, and it's all about luck whether you can get around it. As a result, all national teams, including China, ended up triggering mines. In fact, China's 96B tanks hit the most number of mines, while Russia's tanks basically never ran over any. In truth, the quality and skills of Chinese tanks are problematic. On August 13, 2016, at a military base outside Moscow, an international competition organized by Russia took place. The final day of the tank biathlon was one of the most talked about events, and the Chinese 96B tanks were in the lead for a while on the last day of the competition. However, at a critical moment after the 96B tank crossed the obstacle section, due to the high speed and violent bumps, one of the weight wheels on the left side of the tank fell off. The news that the PLA's advanced 96B tank lost its wheel and the Russian tank won the championship was immediately reported by the Russian media. And the various failures of the 96B tank in the previous 2 years were also reported one by one. The conclusion was that the Russian tank was simple but durable, while the Chinese tank was advanced but unreliable. Chinese military websites and magazines defended why the 96B lost its wheel, saying that the Russians had again changed the rules of the tank biathlon in the 2016 competition. The 96B tank was required to add counterweights, and the Chinese had to add tracks and repaint them as a configuration, which could have been the cause of the accident. The Chinese media also argued that the road was made of granite blocks and the surface was like a washboard road, which was a big test for the tank's traveling system. China's 96B tank didn't slow down during the competition, such as speeding and smashing puddles, which had a great impact on the front loader wheel. That was why there was such an accident. However, the report also admitted that the phenomena of losing a load wheel and breaking a torsion bar during a race wasn't common for tanks. 6 years later, in 2022, when Russia hosted the tank biathlon, a dramatic scene reappeared. China's 96B main battle tank was on the move, and the presenter kept bragging about how excellent the 96B's power performance was, when suddenly a Russian T-72 dustily overtook the 96B, leaving it far behind. The host didn't know how to round off the scene, and it was very awkward. Some Chinese netizens might think that US tanks aren't that great in competition. The US and NATO had the Strong Europe Tank Challenge, which was held in Germany between 2016 and 2018, with no competition after 2018. All three events were organized by the American Army based in Germany together with the Germans. Although the venue was in Germany, the training site was an American military base. The Americans really didn't do so well in these three tournaments. In 2016, the US fielded 2 tanks and placed second and third from the bottom, with first place going to the Germans. In 2017, the Americans barely came in third, with the Austrians taking the title. In 2018, the Americans placed second last out of 8 teams and were only a little bit better than the Ukrainian T-84s. The Americans and Germans definitely didn't have special setups like virtual landmines. In other words, although Russia came first in tank competitions year after year, in reality 1,500 tanks have been blown up on Ukrainian battlefields. Thus, the tank championships in international competitions organized by Russia seem to have relatively low value, not to mention the quality of the CCP tanks. The 2021 CCP Military Power Report produced by the US estimates that the CCP Army needs a great deal of additional equipment to truly modernize, with about 40% of its main battle tanks having been in service for 20 to 40 years and using a great deal of other obsolete equipment. The US military understands the status of all of this as it relates to the actual capabilities of the CCP's military-industrial enterprises. Because the Xi Jinping government focuses on the Taiwan Strait War, the CCP's military spending is heavily tilted toward the Navy and the rocket force, resulting in a severe shortage of vast land and offshore defense capabilities. In recent years, the CCP has emphasized the development of light tanks. In 2015, the CCP began production of a new generation of light tanks, named the Type 15 by year of production. What was the reason for this? According to the CCP, the Type 15 tank has achieved a balanced and coordinated development of firepower, mechanical power, protection, and information power. It has optimized its combat capability. The standard weight of the Type 15 tank is 33 tons, and with reinforced armor it weighs 36 tons. Against the heavy tanks of other countries, the probability of the Type 15 tank's survival should be very small. If it can't detect the opponent first and score a hit, the Type 15 tank can be easily destroyed by the opponent. If you understand the CCP's mindset, you will realize that the CCP never cares about the casualties of its own soldiers, but only cares about whether it can attack and bring harm. Relevant reports in the Chinese official media claim that in modern ground combat, the probability of tanks going up against tanks has dropped significantly, and it should be assumed that there is a high probability that China will not be subjected to a surprise attack by an enemy armored force. This reasoning amounts to overlooking the biggest threat in the north, namely the inability to take on Russia's tank forces. The other key use of the Type 15 tanks that the CCP hasn't spoken of and doesn't dare speak of is against its own people. Such tanks are first and foremost a tool for the CCP's intense internal fighting, capable of quickly bouncing off military coups. Its other use is against the Chinese people, ready to suppress any possible civil unrest or student movements. This is why the official media describes the Type 15 tank as the vanguard of emergency operations on land. Xi Jinping's government attaches great importance to the Navy and rocket force. So, what's the quality of China's aircraft carriers like? We debunked the notion that China's carriers were cracking in an episode aired in May 2023. Here is a clip. In May, netizens discovered from Google Earth satellite photos that the deck of the aircraft carrier was suspected to be cracked. raising questions about whether the Chinese aircraft carrier was a tofu dreg project. The Fujian ship was moored at a pier in Shanghai at the time. The photo has triggered heated discussion. Some media speculated that the suspected crack was actually a blocking cable to assist aircraft landing. However, the blocking cable is usually placed in front of the carrier rather than the end as seen in the photos. So this theory was quickly debunked. It was also reported that the crack was the shadow of a tower on the deck, while some alleged that the real cause of the crack was due to severe distortion in the images taken or transmitted by US satellites. A former captain of a Taiwan Navy's missile patrol ship said in an interview with the Voice of America that modern ships are built in sections. That is, they are built one by one and then assembled in the dock. If the suspected crack of the Fujian carrier is due to welding, it wouldn't be like this. The crack would be straight because the fracture would be in one section. It wouldn't look irregular. This former captain analyzed that if the deck were built with steel plates only, it would be very slippery when the waves splashed in or because of dew. A layer of sanding paint was usually used on the steel plates to increase the friction when the crew walked on it or the aircraft landed on the ship. This was not only the case for the Liaoning carrier but also for the Shandong and Fujian carriers. It was even so for the USS Reagan. Since the Fujian vessel is still undergoing various equipment tests, each seawater line or freshwater line needs to be tested with actual water to confirm if the design goal is achieved. Therefore, for example, the nozzles on the deck will be tested for water spraying. So, when the deck is tested for water spraying, the water will flow in the direction of the sanding paint in pattern. The Taiwanese captain pointed out from his own experience of staying on board the ship for many years that every morning the junior officers and men had to clean the deck to remove the water and oil stains to avoid any accident. He said, "Why this crack is seen here and there? If we use this water movement on the deck to explain it, it makes more sense." Experts from the Center for Strategic and International Studies (CSIS), a U.S. think tank, also published an article on June 13, 2023, denying the rumors, saying that the dark traces on the Fujian were just liquid. CSIS accused the news of being a flood of false information and analyzed commercial satellite photos taken on May 15th. They have shown no visible cracks on the Fujian carrier or any other signs that might pose a problem for the PLA. There was no evidence that the ship's crew was engaged in any repair work to fill the cracks. CSIS also analyzed satellite images from September 8, 2022 and April 23, 2023, and found that the liquid seemed to flow out from the port side and then to the starboard side. Since the Fujian carrier was moored at the pier, the starboard side was sometimes slightly tilted due to tidal oscillations. So, what the captain said makes sense. Past images also show that the dark marks appeared in different places at different times, further proving that they weren't cracks. But again, it doesn't mean that there were no problems with China's carriers. We have also reported that when the Chinese carrier Shandong was caught in a north-south attack by American carriers, it was quite panic-stricken and nervous. On October 29, 2023, the Chinese carrier Shandong, which had entered the western Pacific Ocean, suddenly found itself sandwiched between two U.S. carrier battle groups, one from the south and the other from the north. Worried about being attacked, the Chinese military sent 6 Navy ships to support the Shandong carrier on 4 subsequent occasions. In order to protect the carrier, 48 military planes, including H-6K strategic bombers, were deployed. From October 30th to November 1st, 48 warplanes, including strategic bombers, fighter planes, pre-alert planes, and aerial refueling planes, were deployed from Taiwan's southern waters as a precautionary measure. It showed the outside world that the CCP's aircraft carrier was panic-stricken, nervous, and totally unprepared, making people question its actual combat capability. Chinese carriers are nervous for good reason. Their builders can't be trusted. Let's go back to the case of Hu Wenming. 2 years ago in May, the Chinese media reported that Hu Wenming's fall from grace was announced in the middle of the night by the Central Commission for Discipline Inspection, or CCDI. According to inside information that later came out of the CCDI, Hu was suspected of selling out state interests and taking bribes amounting to 5.28 billion yuan, or about US 740 million, during his term of office. It isn't the 8.4 million as announced by the Shanghai court. In the CCP, if an official with significant power had only taken US 8.4 million in bribes in 20 years of one's career, this individual can be praised as a rare and honest official. Hu Wenming was a central official who led the development of equipment for the CCP's 3 military forces. Over the past 20 years, he worked for a mega state-owned enterprise that produced the mainstay of military aircraft and warships, and was involved in projects such as the J-10 fighter jet produced by the China Aviation Industry Corporation, or AVIC. During his tenure at the China Shipbuilding Industry Corporation, CSIC, he was involved in the refitting of China's first aircraft carrier, the Liaoning carrier, as well as the launching of the Shandong carrier in 2017. At that time, CCTV disclosed for the first time that Hu Wenming was the chief commander of the development of the Shandong. Hu's work covers the construction and research and development of equipment for the Army, Navy, and Air Force, and also includes projects such as the domestically produced large aircraft C919, in which he played a significant part. As a result, Hu was investigated in 2020 on suspicion of serious disciplinary violations. The case also raised public concern that he might have leaked state secrets. Hu Wenming came from the same town as former CCP leader Jiang Zemin, Yangzhou, and both are alumni of Yangzhou High School. Hu's career took off when Jiang Zemin came to power. Jiang never led an army and had no roots in the military, so Jiang used corruption as a way to get the army to be loyal to him and turn the CCP army into a highly corrupt army. Hu Wenming was born in 1957 in Yangzhou. See, didn't he come from the same town as Jiang Zemin? So the netizens were right. Maybe he really is Jiang Zemin's nephew. In 2001, he became the director of the Airborne Equipment Department of the first group of China Aviation Industry Corporation, and was later promoted to the vice general manager. Former senior Chinese journalist Jiang Weiping, now living in Canada, is familiar with China's officialdom, including the inner workings of the CCP's top echelons. He was the chief representative of the Hong Kong Wenwei-Pao office in Northeast China and a senior reporter from 1995 to 2000. In 2000, he was arrested by the National Security Bureau, and in May 2001, he was tried in secret. He was granted early release in 2006 due to illness. Between November 2002 and November 2012, Guo Boxiong, Jiang Zemin's military henchman, was the vice chairman of the CCP's Military Commission, where he was in charge of the Military General Staff and General Armaments departments. He was later taken down by Xi. The CCP's 10 largest military enterprises are all under the jurisdiction of the General Armament Department. It was during the period when Guo Boxiong was in charge, Hu Wenming successively took charge of several major military-industrial enterprises. The corruption is so serious that it's likely to cause the Shandong and Liaoning carriers to be substandard and shoddy counterfeits. Now the Chinese officials have repeatedly claimed that the quality of the aircraft carriers must not be affected. But how can it not be affected? With two leaders, Hu Wenming and Sun Bo, cutting corners and engaging in fraud, you can be assured that the quality of the carriers is compromised. Will you be able to win the war in the future? I know very well about the shipyards and the corrupt people like that. They aren't like those communist leaders in the 50s to 70s. Can they be trusted to build aircraft carriers? Once war starts, they will be knocked out, so Xi Jinping doesn't know anything about China's warship building industry. He doesn't even know 1% of what I know. Sorry, I know these officials too well. Nowadays, in this society, under this kind of system, everyone wants to get a piece of this big cake. They cut corners when they can and cheat when they can. That's why I think it's ridiculous to say that Hu Wenming should build the Liaoning carrier. The two people mentioned by reporter Zhang was Hu Wenming and Sun Bo. During Hu's tenure as chairman of the China Shipbuilding Industry Corporation, CSIC, the then general manager was Swen Boa. In June 2018, Swen Boa was investigated during his term of office and was later sentenced to 12 years in prison. According to official media outlet People's Daily, given that the criminal facts and evidence in Swen Boa's case involve state secrets, the court held a closed-door hearing on the case in accordance with the law. Here's the trick, you'll understand it when I point it out. Why is it necessary to create a case of espionage and leakage? The reason is that once this case is labeled as such, it can't be openly prosecuted. The government doesn't want the public to know what's going on because it's too dark. If the trial is open to the public and the culprits are allowed to tell the story of how this aircraft carrier was jerry-built, won't that make the Americans happy? There will be no need to go to war. Let the Chinese aircraft carriers float in the sea, and after a while they will sink by themselves. Therefore, the justice system of the CCP is unjust and it deceives the people. Xi Jinping, the CCP leader who came to power in 2012, is also the chairman of the CCP Military Commission. Soon after he took office, he put forward his Chinese dream and specifically mentioned that his dream of a strong country was also a dream of a strong military. In an interview in 2021, a scholar who was considered as Xi's think tank claimed that realizing the reunification of Taiwan was Xi's Chinese dream. The aircraft carriers Liaoning and Shandong, which the CCP has spent huge amounts of money on, symbolize the CCP's military power. However, neither carrier has performed well, and they had a series of accidents that have repeatedly embarrassed Xi in the international arena. After the CCP's first homemade aircraft carrier, Shandong, was commissioned, it spent a lot of time in the harbor or undergoing repairs, sometimes for a whole year, with very little time in service to carry out its mission. There have been many reports of quality problems with the Shandong carrier. The carrier has faced technical problems and electromechanical failures during ocean-going training, resulting in some of the carrier's aircraft not being able to take off and land properly, and even problems such as oil leakage and crippling. Several military analysts have told Reuters that the CCP's aircraft carriers are more like propaganda pieces, and their combat effectiveness is questionable if the CCP clashes with the US over Taiwan. Indian media outlet Frontier India, which has long been concerned about China's military power, said in an article in late April that Japan's defense ministry tracked the Shandong's first training in the Western Pacific and found fatal shortcomings in its endurance and resupply ship. According to the Indian media, the Shandong carrier can only last 11 days after refueling in the sea operation, which makes the integrated supply ships of the Shandong carrier battle group its biggest weakness. As the chief director of the design and development of the Shandong carrier, Hu Wenming cannot excuse himself for all the shortcomings of the Shandong carrier. Worse still, the Shandong carrier has spoiled Xi Jinping's Chinese dream to reunify Taiwan by force, a dream Xi is prepared to challenge the US Navy for. But even Xi doesn't know how to clean up such a mess. After Hu Wenming's dismissal, Xi Jinping's own ally was placed in position. But after they were placed there, if they don't change this kind of politics, it will still be the same state of affairs. If a company that builds aircraft carriers has a chairman who is also the secretary of the party committee, it means superpower, and then a new round of corruption will start. It might be even worse than Hu Wenming and the others.